You're listening to the Home Staging Show podcast. I'm your host, Cindy Lin. This is a show where we talk about all things real estate, home staging, and selling your home to live and to sell. Welcome back to Season 8. This is Episode 3. Hey guys, I'm so excited today to have Edie back on the show this week. She's absolutely amazing. If you have already heard the episode last week, we had Edie on the episode last week and just want to give you a brief background if you haven't had a chance to listen to last week's episode. So Edie is a seasoned and very successful home stager based in Seattle. She has had several very interesting careers before working as a home stager, which included a career in mathematics, teaching, being a COO for a world-class medical practice, and being an architect. On the show today, we cover quite a bit, especially for those of you who are interested in learning more about pricing home staging services and building your home staging business. We talk about how can new stagers get a leg up and compete with seasoned stagers, pricing your home staging services, how to style and stage your home without looking cookie cutter, building different streams of income as a home stager, prop selling for production companies, how to generate more leads from your existing clients, and also how to work with real estate agents. For those of you who are interested in joining us for the Six-Figure Floor Plan, the 8-week live mastermind course, Edie is going to be our guest mentor for this upcoming class, starting on Monday, February 11th. She's going to be teaching pricing your home staging services, and she's also going to be with us for a live Q&A session. She's incredibly knowledgeable, and I feel very, very lucky to be able to have her as a guest mentor for our students. So for those of you who want to join us for the program, your enrollment gives you lifetime access for the materials. You're also going to be able to participate in future mastermind groups at any time you like when it's offered. So not to mention, in addition to 20 hours of video and audio course content and 116 pages of worksheets, you're going to also have 6 additional live office hours with me to knock out any more questions you have about your home staging business. For our February class this year, there's also going to be a master class on using Instagram for your business. This is something I'm really going to push for it. So we're going to have private social media pods as well. We're going to help each other to grow each other's following and also build up our business marketing as well. I'm super excited for both of these master classes that we have added for the February class. I think it's going to be a really great group as well. So the early bird enrollment for the program is going to start this Friday on February 1st. I've been doing live streams on Facebook this week on topics that are also covered in the course. So I talk about building the right mindset for your business, money mindset, money blocks, pricing, inventory, and operations. If you miss any of the live stream, just go on our Facebook page at facebook.com/stage for more. And this Friday, I'm going to be teaching a class on these 4 simple but very effective strategies I can use to boost your home staging business immediately after the class. So I'm going to put these links in the show notes, so definitely check them out. For the webinar, there are a total of 4 dates for the webinar. So there's Friday and Saturday, and then 2 more times next week. And there's going to be replay available and be emailed to you. So if you cannot make it, you can watch the replay anytime before the offer expires. And don't forget, as our podcast listeners, you can use the coupon code podcast100 to get an additional $100 off. Again, that is podcast 100, all one word. Just enter that when you check out, and it's going to be on the right-hand side of the page. So that's it. Let's start the show. Hey, so I want to start by talking about pricing, basically where we left off last time. I think one of the issues consumers have is that when they get a pricing proposal from several different stagers, the results can look very different. Because every stagers work differently, there's no standardization in pricing our industry. And there shouldn't be, actually, because every stagers does things very differently. So, of course, their service is going to be different. But the thing is, I feel like most consumers, they just look at the final number, how much they're going to pay, and make the decision that way. But they don't really realize that it can be apple to oranges. So how do you personally approach pricing when it comes to your home staging services?
I'm very transparent about what I'm charging for each different aspect of the staging process. When I talk to people after I've seen the property and I'm preparing a quote, I tell them that I delineate 3 different general things, and that is the staging fee, which is how I get paid and anybody that would be supporting me would also be getting paid. And that includes not just my labor, but they have to pay for my intellectual property as well. You can't just go out and hire a person. They have to have background. So part of the staging fee is that they're paying for my experience and expertise. And then the other two aspects are the delivery, pickup and delivery, or delivery and pickup as it is. And then the rental of whatever we bring in. So I make sure they understand that for me, there's 3 different parts to the initial month of the stage that they must pay for. And you can't just pay for one. It's all wrapped up. I do let them see what each of those costs are and that there is tax included in the state of Washington on your rental. And then after the initial month, I charge on a daily basis. My requirement for removal of staging is 7 business days advance notice. So when we move, and we've done more of that this year, the end of this year, than in past years, but when we move to a daily rental fee, I charge them for 7 days in advance. So basically they're getting billed once a week for the daily fee. And there's 2 reasons for that. Psychologically, it's way easier for them to get a couple of $100 charge than it is for the entire monthly charge. And it really helps my cash flow if I'm simply billing them once a week, and it's always on the same day. So if I'm billing them once a week, then I have consistent cash flow. It also psychologically helps them because they'll say, oh, I didn't realize we were on daily. I see you've charged, so let me give you my 7 days notice now, or we're going to need 10 days for getting all of the contingencies established. So they'll let me know immediately, as opposed to charging for a whole month. And then you get the phone calls, well, but I only need it 2 days. Can't you prorate it and give me the money back? This way, it's much easier on both sides, both for the client and for me. And I'm fine with not having them hold on to the staging for the whole month just because they paid for it. People used to do that. Well, I paid for the whole month, so I want you to leave it in there the whole month. This has worked out better for me. And I think you used to do a daily fee as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I do. I think daily fee is more fair, to be honest. And also, like I said, I don't like conversations like the one you just mentioned where it's like, can't you prorate me? But da, 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 da. I'm a simple gal. I like simple kind of business operations. And I think having daily is very clear. I don't do the 7-day in advance charge. I think for me personally, it's easier for us to just do the math because in Bay Area, everything sells in 30 days. And usually most of our contracts don't go over 30 days. It might go over maybe by a couple days. So, if it's a couple, I'm just going to be like, oh, you're within grace period. It's fine. It's on us, especially if it's an old client. But if it's like a week or something, we will send a final bill. And because the amount is not huge, most people just pay it right away. We don't really have problem with chasing people after bills and stuff like that. And I really like what you mentioned with the psychology part. It kind of reminds me because I just went to South America with my mom, and there's no direct flight coming out of San Francisco. So when we came back from Argentina, we had to fly through Panama, which is like a 7-hour flight. And then from Panama back to Bay Area, which is another almost 8-hour flight. And I think one of the things that Copa Airlines is very clever about is that they send you this upgrade email to business class beforehand. And then it's like a bidding process because they tell you that, oh, here's like, if you bid $90, you have a good chance of getting upgraded to business class, which is $90 extra dollars. But I think what's really clever is that because when you buy airline tickets, when you book business class, it's very expensive. You're like, what? It's like 1,000 something. And so when airline pitches you like this, you're just kind of like, well, I mean, for $200 extra for an 8-hour flight, that's not too bad. I think it's playing into the psychology because you don't really remember what you paid for an airline ticket beforehand because we always book very early. And then so I was like, $200 extra for business class. That sounds reasonable. It's
Right.
me and my mom are we're pretty frugal. We never really like would buy business class tickets flat out. So I'm like, this way we're like, actually this is pretty nice. Maybe next time we will consider buying business class. But
yeah, and see, what I also do similar to that is as soon as I've established, put in all of the staging, I send them a little follow-up letter that says, okay, now your home is staged. This is how everything is going to play out. If you want it removed, you need to give me 7 days notice, which means if it sells instantly, I need to hear from you by day 21. If I don't, I'm going to assume that we will be going on to the daily. And I put in the dates there for when they need to let me know if they want it removed, and then when it's going to switch over to the daily and how much the daily charge is. And sometimes it's like $45 a day, which in their mind is like, oh, $45 a day, that's nothing. And then when you do it for 7 days, it's still a small amount in their mind compared to what they paid for the first 30 days, which includes all of the delivery fees and the staging fees. So since I started doing that, I have had a lot less objection to price.
Yeah, I think that breaking it down really, it's really psychology, because when you're like, oh, the additional rental was like $20 a day, that doesn't seem a lot. 45,
right.
Yeah, it's doable. But when you're like, your renewal is going to be $1,500, people are like, what? That's a lot, So I think I think you're very smart to break it down, and also I think math-wise, it's just easier. I also, like I said earlier, I think it's more fair. I think there's definitely less objection, and I really do feel a big part of our business is really learning how to communicate with clients, not just be transparent, but also be able to break it down for them. And I like that you actually remind them, because we say the same thing. We, like, in our contract, we put the responsibility on the clients, because we're all adults here. I'm not a kindergarten teacher. Like, they're not a child. They pay, utility bills regularly for their home. It's the same thing when they hire a contractor or stager or whatnot. So I tell them in advance that, it is your responsibility to tell us when you want the stuff out. But we also send reminder emails, once the client is booked. We have a workflow. We use 17 hats. So it's like all scheduled out. We'll set up a reminder in our system. Basically, when staging date is done, like, we automatically put a note in the system that on the 20th day, they get a reminder email to see if they want the stuff to come out because the contract is ending. I just think that it's really important to manage the client's expectations. Otherwise, you're just going to have problems down the line.
Yeah. So I don't do that on a regular basis. I require my clients to pay me in full before I'll guarantee their staging date. So sometimes they pay me 2 months before I actually bring the staging in, especially if it's a luxury property. That's why I send the letter as soon as it's staged, and then it's on them. Once the 30 days is up, they'll start seeing a weekly charge, and that is their little reminder if they don't want to pay it. Now, I have someone who has already said, I want you to leave it in until August. I told him I would just do a monthly charge because weekly charges until August, it's just going to drive him crazy with all of these little ones. And he said, that's fine. Just charge me once a month, and I want it in through August. And then if it doesn't sell by then, we'll see what else we need to do.
Yeah, I think that's definitely good. Because I think really you want to know how your client prefer to communicate with you. If they're already flat out said, just charge me to X date, there's no reason of, like you said, doing these crazy little weekly charges.
Yeah, and sometimes I have a client that will say, I really am tight on the budget, so we're going to stage it for the first month. And if it doesn't sell, we're still going to take the staging out.
I think that's good. Set that expectations in the front. And I agree with you. I think it's important not to do any work before you're paid. I see on the forums a lot of stagers complaining about or asking for advice. What should I do? The clients never pay for the job. Don't perform any service before you're paid, or at least get your
Right.
deposit or whatnot to set the date. For us, early on in my business, I had a few issues getting clients to pay on time, and then also to give us the signed contract back. And I realized once I stopped letting people getting the job staged before everything I want to be done is done, then we don't have that problem anymore. We literally will not leave the warehouse if we didn't get our money paid, if we didn't get a contract back. And that's just a golden rule that I never broke again, and we never had issues again.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even guarantee the schedule date unless I had the signed contract, and I require them to pay by credit card. I need to have all their credit card info, and I've run the credit card for the first month. I've already been paid for the whole month before I even get to their property.
Same. I know some stager argued that don't take credit card because they can refute it.
I have the signed contract, they can't.
Yeah,
I had someone
exactly.
try to do that. There's the contract. I use an equivalent to DocuSign, which is an absolute legal binding process. The realtors use it for all their signatures. When they refuted it and I sent the info to the bank went, "Mister, you are nuts. You had a contract."
Exactly. People really don't like taking credit card because of the fees. But for me, to cash in the check, standing in the line at the bank, and having to worry about if it clears or not, because sometimes things happen really fast in real estate. Once the credit card has gone through, it's gone through. I just know that instantly. Right. I don't have to worry about it. Check can take 5 days to clear. In the busy market where everything has happened within a few days, I can't wait that long.
Even when the check starts to clear, there's not enough funds, so it'll be rejected, and then you have to wait another 5 days and communicate with the client. And it's not a reasonable business approach in my book. So.
Yeah, and all that email back and forth, that's admin time. Those are the time that you could be spent doing something else that would get you more return on investment in the business. So I'm just really a fan of just pay the fees, include that basically in your cost of doing business, and then move on. When it comes to pricing, do you price it differently with vacant or occupied, or is it pretty much a similar model that you just described?
I don't do a lot of occupied. The work that I do with homeowners in occupied properties is mostly consultations. They're usually more of the do-it-yourself people. Mm-hmm. I have had a few, and for those, I do pricing the same. It's on a much smaller basis because, there's still a stage fee, a delivery, and a rental. But the difference between bringing in things for a home where people are living and where it's vacant, obviously the amount of stuff that you're bringing in is less. But I'm really very careful about any households that are occupied. I don't bring in anything upholstered, almost never bring in anything upholstered or soft goods on a rental basis. If they need those, then I contract with them. I'll purchase it and sell it to them because I don't want the bedding that they slept in back. Also, if they have children and pets, I don't want the rug with the dog pee all over it, things like that. That pricing is a little different just because I won't rent in certain situations.
I think that's smart because that is really a major concern with homeowners not respecting our inventory. That's a real problem, actually. Even with vacants, we have pool houses back. And then later on, we found all these stains. You know how when people have a greasy head and they sleep on the pillow and they leave this yellow ring? Yeah, mm-hmm. So some of our pillows have that. I wonder how that got there. But, it is what it is in this line of business. Those are kind of the annoying things we had to deal with, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I imagine it's probably pretty similar pricing model with you for starter home versus luxury home. It's just that the value of rental will be a bit different.
Yeah, the price per item is elevated because it's a higher quality and they're almost always brand new. for a
Mhm.
luxury home. I try not to bring in things that are old and used. It needs to have a different presentation because there's a different expectation from the potential buyer. And also, luxury homes tend to be larger, so you're bringing in many more items of every type.
I think that's the tricky thing for home seller because they're looking at proposals and it could be a wide price range. For home sellers, how can they figure out which stager is the right one for them to hire?
They need to ask some really important questions. They need to find out, for example, if the person has any kind of education or professional training. They need to ask about experience and if the stager can show examples in their categories. If you own a luxury home, then you need someone who has done work in luxury homes and they can show you what they present in a luxury home. And there's business aspects. Are they licensed? Do they have insurance? A lot of people are just either stagers or hobby stagers where they kind of take stuff from their house or borrow it from a friend, and they don't really have any of those business things in place. It's really important to understand all of that. If it's a vacant property, there needs to be insurance on the brought in contents. A lot of the homeowner's insurances will not cover rented furniture, rented items. So there are actually now some companies that will offer staging insurance to the homeowner for the contents brought in by the stager. The inexperienced don't know about this. If there's any kind of damage or break-in, then they're totally responsible for the replacement cost of whatever was damaged or taken. Those are the types of things that stagers with experience and training and abilities in business provide, the others don't. So that's the apples and oranges behind the scenes.
I think experience really come into play when it comes to pricing because for a homeowner who's getting a staging proposal from someone who's been in business for 10 years to someone who's been in 5 or in 3 or in 1, I mean, the experience level is going to be very, very different, especially depending on the market as well. If you're in the starter home market, I think experience is important, but not as important as some of the more unique homes, like the 12-sided treehouse you stage. I mean, I think that requires somebody who's very, very experienced in dealing with different kinds of architecture, staging experience, that kind of thing. Whereas if it's a cookie cutter kind of a track home that's very common in a certain neighborhood, experience is not as important. I mean, it's still important, but it's not as important as something where you're in a luxury market.
Right. And the one comment I have about the starter homes is I'm very sad when I see a staged starter home. Whoever has staged it, they always do the same thing and it's the same type of furniture. And there are always ways to make a property look really unique. There are all sorts of different tools that a stager has: artwork, color, style, the way you use lighting. The starter home market does not reflect those choices in the most part. Occasionally, there are some really cute and imaginative presentations, but for the most part, it seems like they just say, okay, that sofa, those 2 chairs, the coffee table, the lamp, something for above, the fireplace, a rug, and we're done.
There's a cookie cutter way to stage it, but there is a way of not making it look cookie cutter. Because I mean, obviously, a living room is going to be usually a sofa, 2 accent chair kind of thing. But there are
Yeah.
combinations and ways that you play with colors and textures to create depth in the space. So
Yeah.
that's where the experience comes in and how that is different from stager to stager.
Right.
One big criticism that our show gets is that, because I interview a lot of very experienced stagers like you or Bobby McGrath, and people are like, oh my God, you guys are just like so hard on new stagers, because I understand experience is important, but how can us new stagers get a leg up? So do you have any advice for new stagers on how can they venture into this new marketplace and really make a space for themselves?
One of the things that I did when I was starting was I found a stager who had been in the business for a while. I worked with her. She didn't pay me, but I got paid with knowledge and experience. So I did that for about 6 months whenever she needed an assistant. Learned both a lot of little tips and ways to do things, and also experienced a lot of things that I didn't think were the best way to approach something, things that she was doing. So when I started getting work on my own, I made sure to do whatever that was differently. Another way is to just practice in your house, practice on your friends. If you're starting, don't just wait for a paid position. I rearranged my house about 4 times before I ever got a paying agent. And I found just by doing that, different ways to look at a space, not necessarily the first or most obvious arrangement and setup is the best. I learned, for example, people almost always with a round table put the chairs straight on, whereas I like to put them on the diagonal because it doesn't block your view. With the offset chairs, your eye can travel past the dining table and usually into another room or into the backyard. And I learned that from playing with my own dining room or the dining set in my kitchen. So practice, go with others, see what you can do to just get some experience. Take pictures of it. My first pictures on my webpage were before and afters of all the different rooms in my house that I had done. And I never revealed that, but that's what I did because that was all I had.
I think that's right on. I think that's great advice. I mean, I say very similar things as well because a lot of new stagers, they email me and ask me about portfolio. Well, you don't have to do a paid job to be able to build a portfolio. You can stage your house, you can stage your cousin's house, you can stage your friend's house. No one has to know. And I think that is a really great advice because it allows you to practice. The more you do, the more you stage, you get better at it. Very first house I ever staged versus the very last house I ever staged, they look very different. So I cringe a bit, think about my first job. But yeah, I think that's how you build experience and how you build portfolio. I mean, I've written about this on the blog as well. And I used to freelance on photo shoots because in the Bay Area, we have a lot of big companies like Pottery Barn is headquartered here, for example. So there's a lot of catalog shoots about that. We have a lot of tech companies, for example, they do lifestyle ads, even if they're selling like a tablet or something or a smartphone. They want to put it in like a family, make it look warm and nice, kind of like in situations. So I assisted quite a bit on these type of shoots with prop stylists. I work for a wardrobe stylist as well. And I really see the behind the scene. I freelance for this agency that has a lot of new stylists. They're very hungry for jobs. And what I found why they're successful is that not only these stylists are very hungry for jobs, even though they're new in the market, they also practice during off times. So when they're not booked for jobs, they partner up with photographers who also need stuff to shoot, and they do their own projects. At their house or at a studio or something, or at an Airbnb kind of thing. They create scenarios where they can shoot and they can produce portfolio photos. So I think it's really important if you're new in the market, your portfolio is really to showcase what you can do to the clients. It's a visual advertisement. It's convincing the clients, telling the story about who you are as a home stager. So it's really important for a portfolio to show that. And so you need to go out to really create a portfolio that you want to be hired for.
Right. So I did 2 other things in the beginning that also gave me a lot of experience. One was I got a phone call from a lady who had just remodeled her house, and it had taken a year. She was retiring and wanted to throw a retirement property. And because of the remodel, they had sold almost all of their furniture. So she wanted me to stage her house for her retirement party. And it was living room, dining room, family room, bedroom. Even the rooms that had furniture in it, she wanted me to bring in things to make it look like it was her belongings. So even though the staging was only in there one day, I charged her, for the whole month because I couldn't charge her for less. It looked wonderful. The 75 people that went to the party all wanted to know where all the furniture came from. So that was great marketing for me. for a one-day stage, I've gotten a lot of work from all of her friends. And the second thing that I did, I got an email from a production company in LA that was coming to the Pacific Northwest. They come every year and they film a lot of the ads just before election time where you see the people who are the candidates presenting. And so they needed someone to be their art person. One time it was in a banquet hall that we had to turn it into an office and they would film. It was really helpful. They bought a few items. I brought in everything and we turned this banquet hall into an office space. Another time it was a school where they wanted it to look like a business. So you brought in things. And what was helpful for me was looking at not only what I did, but then I would stand behind the cameraman and look at what was on in his viewfinder. And I mean, they had a lot of different cameras and they were on tracks and, you know, a whole bunch of different ways that things are either photographed or filmed. So for that, and I work for them every year. I've worked for them every year since I started my business because they come back once a year and they just call me. And so that was a huge education as to how what I do visually translates behind the camera and how it's seen by others. So that was a huge lesson for me. And now I love these people and I see them once a year. And, you know, they call and say, okay, here's what we got. We got a warehouse and we have to turn it into someone's bedroom, you know, those kinds of things. So it's a challenge. I get paid really well and I always learn.
I love that. I love that story. That's great.
You can advertise, you can market for this. You can go to the TV station and talk to their marketing department and say, when you have people that wish to purchase an ad and they want a lot of things brought in, here's my card. Here's some examples of what I do in homes. I could do this for you for your marketing and ad department. So there's a lot of ways to get experience without actually staging a house.
Yes, that's actually what you did with what a prop stylist would do for a production company. And they usually charge by day rate. I would say, though, for a lot of new stagers hearing this, I mean, this is a great income stream as well. Because one of the questions I get all the time is how do I cultivate more income streams as I grow in my business? I think prop styling is a great way to go. I was talking about this the other day with someone about rentals. You can also rent your inventory to production companies for photo shoots or for filming. Those profit margins are significantly higher than renting it for staging. For example, when I used to rent to production companies, the standard rate in the industry is to charge 25% of the retail price. And you can rent this for one day, 25% of the retail price. Some production companies are, depending on the budget, so usually between 1 to 7 days, you can charge 25% of the retail price. And that's really standard. If you go to a furniture store, say, I'm a prop stylist, I need to rent a few pieces, that's the price they're going to quote you. The other thing, too, I found a lot of times production companies are looking for stagers to do these jobs instead of hiring prop stylists is that because home stagers, it's another industry, really. They don't really know what prop stylists would charge. But most of the time, prop stylists charge by day rate for prep, on-site, and also wrap. So a lot of times prop stylists have to go shop for inventory. And so those are prep. And then for wrap, it's like they have to return all the stuff. The client doesn't want to buy them. They would charge a day rate. Usually it starts at around $1,000 per day. That's just for the day rate. It doesn't include inventory. And so what I found a lot of times production companies are looking at home stagers because they realize home stagers don't know what that market charges, so they charge less. So if new stagers are listening to this, you really need to figure out what your local stylist would charge. So you're not also undercutting someone else's market. I think that's something that's really important. Also, like if you realize, you could have been making X amount of money, but you're getting paid less, that's also not good for your worth as well. So definitely negotiate. I mean, any type of client's always going to be like, oh, I have no budget. They always have budget. Come on.
Yeah. So I made a deal with this company. They bought the furniture as we go along. I store it for them for free during the year, and I get to use it whenever they're not using it.
So clever. I love this. This is great.
So, all the sofas, all the rugs, all the lamps, I don't charge them to store it, and I get to use it.
That's a sweet deal. That's a really sweet deal. I mean, this is my experience from working on photo shoots. I see how prop stylists accumulate their inventory because a lot of times you're buying all these props and the agency is like, well, we don't have room to store them. You can just keep them. I mean, they still have to adhere to budget and return a certain amount, but most of the time things don't get returned. Like the good stuff, they just end up in the stylist inventory. So yeah, kudos to you, lady. That's awesome.
There's always a way to make a deal because, they spent all this money and it was used. And I have an ethical problem with taking back something that you've been using for a week, saying that it was never used. That was my suggestion. And they went, oh, you'd store it for us for free? I said, provided I get to use it when you're not. And they were very happy.
Yeah, they have no place. I mean, there's no way they're going to ship it back to LA. I mean, they have no place to do it.
Oh, no. And they travel all over to all different states to do this. So I think I am one of probably a network of many people that they do this with.
Yeah, no, I think it's incredibly clever. You took it off their hands, you solved their problem, and you get to use them. That's great.
And then they call me up and they know that I have the whole fancy desk set up with the desk chair and the perfect lamp and the globe and the maps and everything. And they know I have it. So they don't even have to source.
Parlaying your skills into other creative areas can be very lucrative. I'm kind of actually glad we went off tangent on talking about this. Because I think that's one of the big things. I recently did a reader survey for our blog, and a lot of people are asking about how do I cultivate other streams of income? And I think this conversation is kind of perfect for that. Because a lot of skills that we have can really, because when I did staging, I also, like during down season, like around this time of year, I did a lot of holiday decorating, ranging from residential houses to like big commercial projects. Like I did the ice rink at Union Square in San Francisco downtown. You can also work in visual merchandising. Companies always need people, so I freelance for like Saks Fifth Avenue and Ralph Lauren. I mean, the pay is not great, but it's really great to see how they function and because you work with people who been in the industry for a very long time. I mean, they're really good at what they do, like to sell things visually. And so it's actually, in a way, it feels like an internship because, yeah, sure, I get paid. It's not much, like $20 an hour, but I get to learn a lot about how to do things visually, different skills kind of things. So I think it's a really great time, actually, if you are interested in cultivating other streams of income to kind of really explore different ways you can tap into your skills. I mean, I designed wedding. I mean, that was shocking, but I did it. I did like a couple of my friends' wedding and they loved it and they got published actually. So, there are different streams of incomes that I think stagers can tap into, but they just have to be careful that they're not tanking their core business and getting too distracted.
Doing other things also gives you a whole greater field of connections and networking.
Yes.
So that if you share what you do, just describe it briefly with those people. I've gotten a phone call that said, I was talking to the camera guy, and he has a cousin who has a house that he wants to sell. And he said, you are the person to go to. Well, just because I was there and I talked to him about it and I gave him my card, as a result of that, I got a phone call.
Yeah, and that's great. And I think that's the magical thing about real estate. It's that everybody somehow is connected. I remember when I first got into real estate as a real estate agent, and I was reading this random newspaper article and they interview a real estate agent. And then he was like, you think your client is a one-off client, but no, actually in real estate, it's a whole bunch. Say you stage Mary's house today. Mary's cousin saw it. She loved it. So she hired you to do their house, to decorate it or design it or whatnot. And then when they're selling their house, they have you stage it. And then so now you stage Mary and Mary's cousin's house, and then Mary's friends saw it. And so on and so on and so on. So it's like actually a whole chain reaction. Like you can actually get a lot of clients from just one. So I think it's really important to tap into referral sources.
Yes. And to not simply have the client and then wave goodbye, but maybe send them a little thank you note. The written word still is king in networking. Send them a little thank you note. Thank you so much for using my business, and close a card. They tend to hold on to those cards and give them to other people. So rather than simply work for somebody, the two most important things to remember are to ask for a testimonial and to send them a thank you note.
Exactly. And the thing is, if you don't ask, you don't get. That's the thing. So
Right.
You have to ask. Most people are not going to think to write you a testimonial right off the bat. Most people, if you get them very upset, they'll immediately go to Yelp and write a bad review. But
Yeah.
if you did a great job, they'll just be like, they're just doing their job. Or they don't even think about it because other stuff in life, happening and stuff like that. So, but when you ask, when you send an email, when you call them and ask for a testimonial, people most of the time will be very happy to give it to you. So definitely.
Absolutely. And I give them some little hints, because a lot of times people will say, oh, I'd love to. I don't know what to say. So I'll say, it can be a few sentences. Just say what it was like to work with me, if we were timely, if you felt it was of value to the sale, and I give them a list of about 5 or 6 different starter sentences. They're more than happy to do it once you give them a jumping off point. If you just say, would you write a testimonial for me, or would you do a recommendation? It's kind of awkward because they're not really sure what you're asking for.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing with client interaction. A lot of time it's like a dance. Someone has to lead and someone has to follow. And the thing is, you have to give them cues. Sorry, I just came back from Argentina and it's all about tango. And so I was like, oh, it's kind of like a dating relationship. Like you don't know what you're getting yourself into, so to speak. And it's always much easier to get clients to do what you want before you deliver what they want.
Right.
You really have to understand how to, it's not manipulating your client, but it's definitely, you have to understand how to communicate with your client to be able to get the result that you want.
Yeah.
And especially in terms of client communication, things can go very wrong very quickly. I mean, with real estate agent, they have a very tough job because they have to hold a transaction together. And there's so many points during that transaction, it can fall apart very easily. And that's why a lot of new stagers complain about, oh my God, it's so hard to meet like seller clients sometimes. It's because real estate agents don't know you. They're scared that you're going to say something wrong, piss off their client, and their client get mad at them. And so when you're working with real estate agents, especially it's a new client, you want to be very, very careful about your communication. Like you definitely want to be very on top of everything, very professional. So then real estate agent trusts you and they will start talk about you in their offices. And that's how you build clients, really.
Frequently, I will get the call from the real estate agent initially, whether they're going to be paying for the staging or the homeowner is. And if I've not worked with them before, I try to get them to understand that I'm really part of their team. My job is to help them sell the house. Your client will probably maybe see me once. If there are any things about the property that you feel strongly about that you would like me to look at and speak to the client, I can do all your dirty work. If you think that this place needs new paint in every room, and I agree, that I am happy to do that, say that. And then if the client has a fit, they can have a fit with me. They're never going to see me again. And I will take the brunt of that off of your shoulders. So that's an example I give them. That's a big relief to a lot of realtors because they're not sure how pushy I am or how I run my business. And when I explain to them that I see my job as visual marketing to assist in the sale of the property that's going to make them money, they're just much happier with me as a stager.
No, I totally agree. I think really it's about trust. I think a lot of stagers focusing on finding home sellers as a client. I think it's more important to find a real estate agent, like a really good one that you can team up and grow the ranks with. Because when I first started out with staging, I work with agents who are new at selling houses, and we came up together. And so the trust was built throughout the time, throughout the year. And so every time we work together, it just feels really smooth because they know how we work. We know how they work. I have this trust that his client's going to pay on time. I know if their client doesn't pay, my real estate agent will fight for me for it, and vice versa, that they trust me. I'm going to deliver this agent on time and it's going to look great. And they're ready to sell, ready to photograph within a day kind of thing.
Right.
So
Right.
I think it's really important to look for real estate agents that are really good fit with your business models, because I think that's also difficult when you are stagers, because in the beginning you have to try everything. It's kind of like dating. I'm sorry, I'm single, so I have a lot of dating analogy, but it's like you have to like date different guys to figure out what type of guy really works for you. And it's the same when it comes to client. It is like a courtship. Like you really have to work with different kind of clients, different type of houses to really figure out where your sweet spot really is. But once you figure it out, it's so nice. It's really nice. It really changed my entire business.
Initially, I didn't understand that there are actually sellers agents and buyers agents. In my area, some people don't do both. They are either exclusively dealing with the seller or exclusively dealing with the buyer. So it took a while for me to sort that out and figure out who I really needed to be connecting with, because the buyer's agents aren't really concerned with home staging.
Yeah, they don't care about selling. They just want to, work with buyers.
Yeah. So, it took me about a year to realize that, they would sit and listen to my presentation and they were very gung-ho, but I never got any work from them. And then finally, I started asking, so do you predominantly represent sellers or buyers? Before I went in to do a presentation I got practice, but it was kind of a practice in futility because I spent all this time trying to cultivate agents, but it was not the area of real estate that they would ever use. So new stagers need to understand that difference.
I think that's one of the things why people think office presentations don't work, because when you're going to office meeting, you're doing a presentation, it could be a room full of buyer's agent. So they're like, yeah, this sounds great, but they're never going to hire you because they don't work with sellers. So you can go to the office manager and pitch and ask, would your seller's agents like to learn how to sell more, to make a more targeted pitch instead of, hey, can I just come by and do a presentation for 5 minutes?
Right.
I think with some of the new stagers, because they never worked in real estate before, they didn't really understand. Within real estate agents, there are many different kinds. Even within sellers agents, some sellers agents only do a type of homes. Some agents only sell luxury homes, for example. In the Bay Area,
or certain neighborhoods.
Yeah, like my top producers are the ones that focus in certain neighborhoods. It overlap with our target market. So it worked very well. I actually met a seller's agent. He only sold houses within a 5-mile radius of his house. It's crazy to me, but that's all he does. Farming. He's very concentrated, and it worked well for him. So you just never know. And I met this other seller's agent. She lives in this gigantic condo complex in San Francisco Bay Area. Within that condo complex, there are these 3 huge buildings. That's 600 units. So that's all she sells. She just sells those condos over and over. But it works for her.
She's the representative for that complex.
And people know not to go in there and look for a listing because she's going to decimate you, but she's just more experienced. She knows the condos very well. She knows everybody. Of course, it's like a no-brainer. Whoever lives there is going to have them sell her unit. That's why I think I always say that, especially in our course, that marketing has to be a very targeted effort, because you really need to figure out who is your ideal client and you go after them for it. Otherwise, you're just going to be wasting a bunch of time on people who have no consequence to your business. So what are your top advice for new stagers coming into the market?
Well, I think I mentioned a few things last time, so I'm going to mention something different this time. And what home stagers need to make sure in their contract they need to include that a design clause, that the design of the staging is at their discretion and not at the approval of the homeowner or client.
Ooh, I really like that. That's a really great point. I think that's something we don't really talk about very often. But yeah, it's really, I mean, it's your contract. It's for your business. So it's based on what you want, not your client.
You need to discuss that with them before you send them a contract, because you are not decorating their home. You're visually marketing it. Stagers have the experience. They know what's going to work and what type of house and mostly in what neighborhood. Don't be afraid to tell them to take down the curtains from 30 years ago, even if they paid a lot of money for them. The design of the staging is at your discretion. And if you have that in the contract and they sign it, and there is, at least it's a point of discussion, because no one should sign a contract without reading it. And if you've discussed it as well, which I always discuss when I send, I call up the client and say, did you receive it? Okay, here are the key points, and I go over the key points. But the one point that most clients have a problem with, and sometimes it's the realtor, is they had a different vision than what I've had, and they don't like it. Oh, could you switch this out? I don't like the color, whatever. You can save yourself a lot of grief by having that clause in there. Now, sometimes, depending on the client, I will switch something out, but that's for your own protection as a home stager. Simply say in your clause that you have discretion in the design.
I think that's amazing. I really love how there's a saying in my culture. I'm from Taiwan originally, but there's a saying in our culture where we vaccinate the client. So I think that phone call really, it's because I think, again, it's communication. Sometimes clients don't understand how you work. When they see the contract, they might feel like, ugh. What you're doing is to remove that obstacle for the client. You're removing the opportunity for them to say no to you. So I think that's a really, really great way of doing business.
Yeah, I don't like no's, so I do everything I possibly can to make sure I can hear maybe and we can work on it, or I can hear yes, but I don't give up.
So what happens when you hear a no? Do you ask for why and then try to?
Oh, I do. And sometimes people will actually say they're looking at a number of different stagers, and then later they'll say they went with someone else. And I'll say, for my own input, and would you please tell me why you decided on that stager specifically? I do that not by email or text. I make a phone call. I have a conversation with them and say, I would like to be able to include things that you find that are important if I were to have a future project with you. So can you tell me why you made the decision to use a different stager? And sometimes it's like, well, it was my sister's cousin,
Yeah.
And sometimes it's, I went for the lowest price. And then I discuss what the lowest price is really getting them.
Right.
And I've had people say, you're right. I need to talk to that stager. And I've had 2 cases where they've called me back and said, I changed my mind. I want you.
Ah, that's great.
I'm not trying to convince them. I just want them to understand what's important. I don't ask them to tell me what the other person's quote was, but what it included.
I've gotten sellers email me back. They took the screenshot of the pricing. It's apple and oranges. I don't know what the stager is offering you, so I can't really say why she's doing it $500 less than I do. All I can say is that if you want the result that you see on my portfolio, this is the price for it. Anything less than that, you're compromising it. So
I don't address what the other stager has offered. I say, this is what my is including, in case it kind of glossed together because you read a lot of them. So I'm including the photography. I'm including, and I'll go through the list of the different things that I'm including. I'll say, just make sure that for the reduced rate, you are at least getting the same things that I am offering you. And that's usually the point at which they go, let me think about that.
it's to point out what value you're bringing to the table. Because I think most home stagers just send off the thing and be like, we'll just see if they respond or not. But no, actually, you need to follow up. If they didn't email you back within 2 days, call them and be like, hey, I just want to check in and see if any problems or questions, and if there's anything I can answer for you.
My quotes are only good for 5 days. So on the 6th day, I call them and I say, well, the guaranteed price that I sent you in the quote, it's now 6 days, so that price may change because the items that I would have used may no longer be available, and different items are different price. So I just wanted to check if the lack of response was that you were considering or you were uncomfortable with letting me know you did not choose me. Because a lot of times people don't know how to say they chose someone else.
Yeah, so they ghost you instead.
They don't get away with it.
No.
I call them up and I just ask, and a lot of times it's, I've been so busy, I meant to get back to you, that kind of thing. Don't be shy. If it's your business, promote your business.
I totally agree with that. And I really love you brought up the point where you put an expiration date on your proposal. We did the same because, like you said, things could change a week from now. And I have actually sent out proposal and the client called back 3 months later. It's like, no, our house is finally ready. Construction is done. I will be like, but all the inventory we wanted to use for your house are now out. So that price is going to change a bit, kind of thing. So I think it's definitely a good protection to put an expiration date on your own proposal.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you again for being on the show today. You're
welcome.
So that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't left a review on iTunes, please do so. It will really help others to find our show. If you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, you can comment on the show notes on stagerumor.com/podcast. You can find the show notes by going to our website. And that's it. Have a fantastic week and happy staging.